the hot seat today, MEP Nikki Sinclaire.
Your voice, your life. BBC Coventry and Warwickshire.
Yes, it's another of those moments on the show to give you the opportunity to speak to the people at the top who represent your interests at the highest level. Nikki Sinclaire joins me live in the studio. She's your member of the European Parliament in the West Midlands, representing you. So any questions about the Eurozone crisis, how the Midlands is affected, now's your chance to speak. Do give me a call, 0845 900 5200, or text or email. But do get your questions in quickly because we've a lot to get through in a very short space of time. Nikki, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. If you take a look at the front pages, and I've just got a couple here at the moment, front page, Chancellor shores up banks with 100 billion, emergency move in face of Euro meltdown, 114 billion kiss of life for Britain because of the Euro meltdown. What's it like being in Europe at the moment?
I think it's very stressed. There are 750 odd MEPs and they are incredibly stressed at the moment, as is the Commission and the Council. I think that their political dream is crashing about their ears and they're a bit like headless chicken.
Just define, just for absolute clarity, what we're talking about here when we're talking about what you represent and where and how.
Yeah, I represent the West Midlands region, which is absolutely huge. It's 5 million people. It's from Stoke-on-Trent all the way down to Hereford, obviously Warwickshire, Shropshire, the Greater Birmingham area. And there are 7 MEPs in the West Midlands. I'm an independent MEP. I'm Eurosceptic. I'm pro-referendum. And I go to Strasbourg once a month. I've been there this week. And I go to Brussels probably about 3 times a month, and I attend committees in Brussels, and in Strasbourg I vote at plenary and give speeches.
You must be a pretty lone voice.
Maybe. I'm certainly of the minority because all they're pro-EU and they think they should have more Europe. They want a federal Europe. But, lone voices sometimes succeed, and, if you believe something is right, it's worth standing up for.
Yeah. Do you find it difficult to have your voice heard because you are a lone voice?
I think my voice is heard because obviously I am allowed speaking time. This week I've spoken 5 times in the chamber, and I do have higher on average. It depends whether you put yourself in and make yourself available for speeches. So the harder you work, the more chance you have. Of course, I'm not over there to win friends. I'm over there to represent the people of the West Midlands, and I might be a minority voice in the European Union, but I certainly, according to opinion polls, represent the vast majority of people in my constituency, the West Midlands and the UK.
Questions coming in thick and fast, and obviously we've got our own questions to ask, but I want to put the listeners' questions first and foremost. One here that says, and it comes from Ron: "Hi Annie, Euro MPs represent us." No, they don't, Annie. When was the last time they asked us if we're happy to spend billions of pounds bailing out European countries, or asked us if we're OK with Europe telling us what to do? No, Annie, it's not about representing us, the people. If it was, we were given a vote as to whether we want to be part of that in the first place.
Yes, and I totally agree with that. I mean, I'm not a pro-EU MEP. I was the MEP that collected the 100,000 signatures last year that forced a debate in Parliament. I want a referendum. I think it's the only honest way to go is to have an in or out referendum, have a national debate about our membership of the European Union. MEPs do not represent... There are only 73 UK MEPs out of 750. That's only just under 10%. And when you have 1/27th of a say in the Commission, we are not represented as being the second largest contributors. No, British people are not properly represented in the European Union because we can't be.
Clearly, this weekend is going to be a very poignant moment as far as the Eurozone is concerned, as Greece goes to vote yet again. Lots in the papers over the last few weeks of what will happen if they vote for staying in. They get a party that will stay in the euro, or those that will say, no, let's go out and we're just going to renege on that debt. How worried, on a scale of 1 to 10, is the atmosphere and the people in European Parliament at the moment about this?
I think they're incredibly worried, because what they're doing with Greece, and they have been, is putting sticking plasters over the situation. And now they're doing it with Spain and also with Ireland and Portugal. It's an absolute serious problem. They've broken their own rules. The Maastricht Treaty, which is what set up the single currency, said there wasn't supposed to be bailouts, and the original bailout that Greece got was funds that were supposed to be earmarked for natural disasters. So they broke their own rules, and Greece, misrepresented their financial situation to join the euro. But such was the political elite across Europe, helped by Goldman Sachs, that they wanted to push forward this political project and ignored all the basic economic rules. To think that a country like Greece or Ireland or Portugal could trade equally with and borrow equally on the terms of Germany is just absolutely ludicrous.
Here in Coventry and Warwickshire, what does this crisis mean for people in this area, especially now that Spain, Greece, Portugal and Italy and indeed Ireland are all in trouble? It's like a pack of cards, isn't it?
Yeah, Ireland was a bit more of a problematic for us in the UK and therefore in Coventry and Warwickshire, because we do a huge amount of our trade with Ireland, so it was necessary for us to spend money on helping the Irish economy. Because we're not in the Eurozone, we don't directly help some of these other countries, but we have done via the IMF, and what we do is actually secure loans, and as it's evident to everyone that Greece will default, we will have to pay those that security in. Now, that in the case of Greece, then the last bailout was £10 billion. Just imagine just what a fraction of that 1 billion could do for investment of jobs here in Coventry and Warwickshire.
However, the argument is that we are no man an island entire of itself, and that in fact we cannot continue to operate in isolation without being part of trade agreements for Europe and worldwide beyond.
Absolutely, and I agree with that, and I don't think I or anyone else has ever advocated that we are totally isolated. But what we've actually done is we've actually joined into a flawed club, and it's actually protectionist in its own right. You tell African, some of the poorest states in the world, that the EU is not protectionist. It's very protectionist and causing poverty in Africa. We can't trade with the US directly. We can't trade with India or China. We have to go via the European Union, so we don't even have trade sovereignty. And we'd be better off. This country made its wealth on trading with the world, not in a protectionist Eurozone, which is what we've stumbled into.
I know that from what we want, as far as if you listen to what the government says, UK, and actually we have something in common with Denmark. We're kind of on that same level to a certain degree, because we're staying out, and to all intents and purposes at the moment for good. But UK and Denmark secured Euro opt-outs, but want to say in decisions about it. And the UK says the more it asks for, the more it will get in return. But if we're just peering over the fence, over the wall, sort of Chad-like, what strength do we have? What clout do we have as a country?
Well, I think you go back to the very first question that you asked me, and that's why I am so pro-referendum, because one of the things that's probably changed since I've been elected as an MEP, going there thinking everything's bad about it, is I can actually see what is wrong with our relationship with Europe. We have, in particular, Conservative, Labour and Liberal Democrat MEPs going there with looking over their shoulder at what the British electorate is saying. So we need a more honest relationship with Europe. And I think the only way we can have an honest relationship with the European Union is have a national debate and a referendum. And then whatever that decision is, whether to stay in and then, as you say, fully engaged, or leave and then have trade agreements with the world, including the European Union, we have a trade deficit with them. So it's going to be in their interest to give preferential trade terms with us.
If we had a referendum, what do you think ultimately that would achieve?
Well, it would determine our future, and if people voted to stay in the European Union, there would be a mandate for the politicians. There would be an argument to say, yes, let's engage fully and make this work. We all know, everyone knows, that the majority of British people are incredibly Eurosceptical.
Are they? On what do you base that?
Well, on opinion polls. I commissioned myself when I submitted 100,000 that showed that 53% wanted to leave, 80% wanted a referendum, I believe, and 87% wanted no more further transfer of power to the European Union. So I think that's a majority of people. And subsequent opinion polls say that. I think the Times led with the article the other day, 8 out of 10 people want a referendum. on the European Union matter. We need to sort this out. We're actually damaging our interests having this halfway house and these arguments about Europe.
Coming back to the problem within the Eurozone and how it impacts here, we've had Spain, Greece, Portugal and Italy in trouble. Carl has tweeted, he said, how many more debt-riddled EU countries are there on the horizon? Is there twitchiness in Brussels or Strasbourg about who's
Cyprus? Cyprus have had their credit rating brought down 2 notches by Moody's this week. I think it's called contagion, the domino effect, and that there are Spain will come back for more money. If you think that an economy like Spain can be bailed out for 100 billion, it's a bit like these figures are absolutely huge for your listeners. They can't. Some people find it hard to relate, but if I just put it like your credit card, they're actually borrowing money to pay off the interest of their credit card, but the problem's not going to get sorted until the principal debt is sorted. And the only way, like a country like Iceland, who had these problems a few years ago, they were able to devalue their country, as was Argentina about 12 years ago. And then you can get growth. You can then compete. Greece, which is the biggest problem, look at their tourist industry. But there are a lot of your listeners that used to go to Greece quite regularly. When they joined the euro, prices just escalated, and they started going to Turkey because they became uncompetitive.
Let's go to the lines because a lot of people calling. Rita is in Stoke. Morning, Rita.
Good morning, Annie.
Good morning. You're through to Nikki Sinclaire, MEP.
Yes, thank you very much.
Good morning.
Hello. I'm Rita Norman with Voluntary Organisation for Disabled. Coventry City Council decided to remove traffic lights from all the junctions. I've got a report here in front of me from Guide Dogs. They've done a report to the council, Coventry City Council. They've completely ignored them.
This is about shared spaces, the shared crossings that we now have, and they are growing in various towns and cities, and we've got some here in Coventry, just so Nikki's aware of that.
Yeah, we know it come from Europe, from this, because we've read up on it, or Hans Modevan, he was the infrastructure engineer. But the main problem is, we'd like Nikki to raise this in Europe, because it came from Europe, and we want to know, has this ever been reviewed? Because they've removed them from Warwick. We know there's problems there. There's problems all over Britain with these sheds.
Can you just be very specific about your point to Nikki then?
Yeah. I'd just like to say to Nikki, would it be possible, as a Euro MEP, could it be raised in the European Parliament to ask, has it been reviewed? Because there's problems with the blind and the deaf.
Okay.
Those controlled crossings, the boxes underneath, was put there for the blind and deaf with a spinning wheel underneath to allow them to know when to cross the road.
All right, so Rita, let me go to Nikki on that one. The issue of shared spaces which are being developed around our towns and cities.
It's not on any of the committees that I sit on, but what I'm quite happy to do is actually put in a formal question to the relevant commissioner and report back of what the answer is, and then take it further.
All right then, Rita, so there you have it from Nikki on that one. One here which says, good morning, Annie and Nikki. I'm an EU sceptic on full political union. How can the EU have the temerity to lecture us and make laws about financial matters when their own accounts have never been signed off? I'll be listening on the car radio with interest. That's from Howard. So, Howard?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've lost count. It's about 16 years now that their own accounts haven't been signed off. It's because they're just... what it's like is they just really don't care about the minutiae. They're just so headstrong about getting their political project, about their single Europe, that they want a United States of Europe, and they don't care about the collateral damage. And it's okay. We can repair this by having bigger Europe. Well, if you're making an error by moving forward and you're making these errors, I think you should step back. And they don't understand that in the European Union.
Okay. One here from Jazz who says, why do MEPs get paid so much with lots of benefits?
I can tell you we're paid extraordinarily well. And anyone would like to go to my website...
How much do you get paid?
I get paid in euros. I think it's about 96,000 euros.
96,000 euros. So in real money, that's...
Oh, it's about 80. We've just obviously had a bit of a pay cut because of a euro.
Yes, quite rightly so, yes. About £80,000.
It's
and
about
then,
that.
And then
we're obviously taxed. We're obviously taxed on that. As
so
well.
that's a lot of money. Why do you get paid so much?
Well, obviously, I don't choose to get paid. Obviously, I've taken the job. But that is what MEPs are paid, and there's other allowances, etc. as well. If someone really wants to have a look at this, they can go on my website, www.yourmep.org/transparency, and you can see how I put all of this out on how much we get and how much I spend. I actually put back more than half of my post-tax salary back into my campaigns. For example, doing that 100,000 petition campaign was a very expensive project. And
so do you think MEPs get paid too much?
Absolutely.
What should
it is a difficult job. It's not. So you've kind of got to weigh up. I think
what's so difficult about it?
I think
a lot of people listening to this would have been hard pushed to know who their MEPs are.
Absolutely.
You say there are 5 that represent
Seven.
There you go. Represent in the West Midlands. Okay. Everyone phone me up and tell me who the 7 are.
Well, exactly. And I would probably sometimes also point to the media that because 75% of our laws are made in the European Union in this country, and yet we more cover with some of what our councillors do rather than what the MEPs do. And as your previous caller, as something that's actually been made a decision in Europe has impacted Coventry, and yet that was probably never covered the time that decision went through the European Parliament.
How much of what goes on in Brussels or Strasbourg impacts on everyone who's listening to this show in Coventry and Warwickshire?
For everything, I'd say it makes 75% of our laws. Absolutely everything you can pretty much think of starts somewhere in the European Parliament. And that there's numerous committees. I sit on 4 committees. And, nearly everything that happens that affects us somewhere down the line starts its life in the European Parliament.
Is there a view that MEPs just sort of go over there and they spend a lot of time sitting on committees or talking to the commissioners and pushing wadges of paper around but actually achieving very little?
Yes, I'd agree with it. I'm a Eurosceptic. I want us out. And, that I would say, to be fair, the 73 UK MEPs, I would say that 23 MEPs do a very good work from across the spectrum, whether they be pro-EU or Eurosceptic like me. I think 23 of us do a really good job and 50 are a waste of time.
Let's go back to the phone lines. Mark is in Coventry, and we should say, Mark, that you are a member of Coventry UKIP.
I am indeed.
All right, just so that we know that. Mark, so you're through to Nikki.
Good morning,
okay,
Mark.
well, firstly, I would like to say there are few individuals, in my opinion, within the political sphere who have the guts to stand up and shout for the United Kingdom PLC, and I think Nikki is one rare example. My comment, I think really you've perhaps touched on this earlier. We have a government that, in my opinion, inevitably, I'm going to say this.
Well, I was going to say you would say it because you're from UKIP.
Yeah,
Go on anyway, but keep it short.
Okay, this government is so European friendly that it's forgetting the people of this city, and this shows itself in so many ways.
In what way? Give me one example.
One example. We've got a government that's backing a European train project called HS2. We're going to pour billions into that, but at the same time, our elderly haven't got a decent pension. They're in fuel poverty. The government does not do enough about it. I just want to comment, just ask Nikki to comment on that type of approach that our government has got. They seem more interested in bailing out Europe and not interested in good old British people here in Coventry.
Absolutely. I mean, HS2 is a prime example.
You're against HS2, presumably.
I'm against HS2. Yeah. It's a part of the European Transnational Railway. The link is to create this. But what they don't understand is that we are kind of a relatively small country, as opposed to some of these, Germany or so forth. We don't need this level of infrastructure. I travel on train quite regularly to London and get there quite fast. And also, the project is about 30 years down the line. Well, how do we know where we're going to be? Would you buy a car that's 30 years old? The development is so huge. It hasn't been thought out properly. The business case this week has been shown that it's to be fundamentally flawed. And this money, and what Mark says is absolutely correct. They invest in European projects so blindly, billions and billions of pounds, but when it comes to local services, public services, they're only too eager to cut back.
You've campaigned a lot on the Travellers site at Meriden, again looking at another local issue away from HS2, and the question of sites for travellers across the country is obviously an emotive one. What more do you think should be done or could be done from Brussels on this issue? Is more legislation needed?
Well, there has been some reports gone through the European Parliament, again putting more emphasis on public services to provide more services. services. The issue, the why first thing I really want to make sure, I'm not anti-traveller or anti-gypsy. That isn't the point. The point that I got involved here was to show how the ECHR, the European Convention of Human Rights, which is what the travellers tend to use or rely on when they go to court and use legal aided funds to go through these courts, we're talking hundreds of thousands, even millions of pounds, that this is flawed, and it actually protects the minority and doesn't protect the law-abiding majority, and that's why I've got involved to highlight this issue. I think that councils do need to look at their responsibility of finding adequate sites for these people, but green belt sites are no way and can never be adequate sites for travellers.
Back to some of the events that are going to happen this weekend. We've got obviously the vote in Greece. Mm-hmm. If it goes, as the papers are calling it, to Drachmageddon, what's going to happen? Is the whole EU as an institution, as an organisation, going to fall like a pack of cards at its extreme?
Potentially it could. I mean, a lot depends on Germany, because they, we're the second largest contributors to the European Union, but by far, and they're the main.
How much do we contribute?
We're the second. I mean, there's debates on what the figure is. Anything from like 9 billion up to about 40 billion. It depends on what you count, because there are some unseen costs. For example, the implementation of legislation and so forth, what they actually cost industry. But we actually, by the very minimal figures, we actually transfer £9 billion every year.
But on the other hand, we do great trade with the European.
Not as much as the pro-EUs would like to tell you. 50% of our trade is with the European. Of our external trade is with the European Union, but 80% of all UK trade is internal. So therefore, that leaves trade with the rest of the world at 20%, and only 10% of that was with the EU, of which we're running at a deficit since 1972.
So hang on, what do we in terms of trade agreement and trade that we're doing, because obviously we do a lot of manufacturing in this region, that with West Midlands. What is the percentage of trade as a country, UK, PLC, does with the Eurozone?
10%.
10%?
10%. Because
and where does that figure come from?
Well, 80%, this is the Treasury zone, but 80% of all trade done within the UK is internal. I go and buy something from a local company, that's internal trade. Yes? So 80% of all the trading that's done in the UK is internal within the UK. Okay, so only 20% is done with the rest of the world, of which 50%.
So you're saying that we've only got 20% export?
Sorry?
20%.
No, 20% of our trade, of which we run a deficit. And with the European Union, we run a deficit. We buy. I mean, you can just go to your shops and you look at the cars on the road. There are Peugeots, there are Citroens, there are Mercedes, there are BMWs. How many British-made cars there are? There are some, but they're minimal. So we have a massive trade deficit with the European Union. So if we were to ever leave the European Union, as I said earlier, we would have a free trade agreement, because it wouldn't be in their interest to have that trade war with us. Because are the Germans going to say, we're not going to sell you our cars? Are the French going to say, we're going to stop selling you our cosmetics and wines? It's not going to happen. So
what's going to happen, do you think, come Sunday and the Greeks vote, because it is a very critical vote?
Yeah. Well, I was in Ireland a few weeks ago for that referendum, and the Irish were blackmailed and forced into agreeing this austerity treaty.
That's a very strong term to say.
Well, I was there, and I spoke to them. I spent the whole week there, and I must have spoke to over 500 people. Yes, and they said, well, what choice do we have? The government telling us we must do this. Yeah, we don't want it, because the Irish keep being asked, they keep saying no, and they're re-voting, and they say we don't want this, but we have to have it. Our government's telling us we have to have it, otherwise we won't have any money left. So I think that's blackmailed. So over 500 people I spoke to, and what I'm hearing from Greece, although I haven't been there personally, is that a similar type of thing, that the European Union is spending hundreds of thousands of euros putting propaganda into Greece. I mean, it happens. I was in Denmark for their referendum in 2000.
But if you're saying, all right, we're going to come back to this point in just a moment. I need to go to travel, and then we'll come back and talk some more.
BBC Coventry and Warwickshire. Travel you can trust.
Sarah?
Yeah, we've got a couple of problems, Annie, on the M40 now, the southbound side. We've got an overturned vehicle between junction 16 at Henley and junction 15 for the Longbridge Islands. So we're getting reports that one lane is closed for recovery. And on the northbound M40, the exit slip road off at junction 13 at Bishop's Tatchbrook, that has a lane closed because of a broken down vehicle. I'm Sarah Tilley, more in half an hour.
Travel you can trust from BBC Coventry and Warwickshire.
We're talking politics, but of a European kind. MEP Nikki Sinclaire is with me. Just before we went to travel, you were saying that money is being spent on propaganda by those, the European Commission or wherever, on ensuring that Greece stays in the euro? Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, what they're saying is it's the propaganda has been spent on saying, unless you agree this austerity package, and you know that it's basically it's going to be curtains for you. It's me paraphrasing, but that's the type of materials they put out. They put those out in Ireland.
What sort of material are they putting?
Well,
in?
they put out adverts in newspapers. They put out materials like this, you know, financed by the Commission, which is. They put it out as explanatory documents. You know, I saw these in Ireland and I have them in my possession, and it's just pure propaganda.
But what happens if Greece decides not to stay in the euro? What are the implications?
Well, that's not their decision on Sunday. That isn't the decision.
No, it isn't. But it will be as a result of who they vote for.
Exactly.
That's what I'm saying. Whoever they vote for, they are saying whether they want to stay in the euro or not. Now, what is the implication for that? For anybody who's listening to this programme today saying, well, I don't care what happens in Greece, but maybe they should. And why should they?
Okay, the implication is if they don't vote for one of the main, and they vote for this left-wing party who wants to, or is anti-austerity, but they do actually want to stay in the euro, but the reality is I don't think they can have no austerity and stay in the euro. It's not feasible.
It doesn't tally.
No. Then it's very likely that Greece will have to default and leave the Eurozone.
And what are the implications for people listening in Coventry?
The implications for that is almost like the domino effect. It's mainly the French banks that are exposed to the Greek debts. We're not so exposed. But what that would lead to is the non-confidence of the Eurozone, and that would then lead to further problems in Spain, where we are further exposed to. Look, this project was a disaster from the beginning. Thankfully, the UK stayed out, otherwise we'd be in a worse mess than we are now. Because of our linking within the European Union, we are going to take a hit on this. And it goes back to some of the questions you've asked.
What kind of a hit?
Well, it's a financial hit. We've already put in 10 billion. We've already promised 10 billion to secure Greek debts, which is so obvious that we've got to come up with this 10 billion.
Well, that brings me on to a question from Carl, who says, when the EU finally, obviously clearly thinks it will, when the EU finally goes under, who will be left carrying the financial burden? Germany? And with the UK now pumping billions into our own banks, does this suggest that they finally conclude the EU dream is over?
Yes, I do think that the Euro dream is over. It's just how long that they will resuscitate it. I think the most kindest thing for them to do is find an orderly way out. And this happens, you know, it's not... Currencies are changed. I think it's happened 43 times since the Second World War. You know, currencies leaving currency unions, especially from France, for example, and their former territories. So it can be done. It's just how professional it's done. The problem you've got, and I keep coming back to it, is the professional political elite and their dream of a single Europe. And there are some people like Barroso who are not willing to give up this dream.
If the dream does turn into a nightmare,
I think it already has.
Turning into a well-worn cliche here. Ultimately, would you like to see the disbandment of the EU?
Well, to be honest, you know, I count myself. It's not for me. But the point I stand for, I stand up for Britain. It's not for me to tell other countries what to do.
No, well, you must have a view.
I have a view. It's up to them what they do. I would like to see the UK leave the European Union, forge its trading links with other countries, including Europe.
And you don't think that would leave us isolated?
No, it won't, because I've already given you the example. We have a trade deficit. They need to trade with us. They would need to. You know, we are the city which they're trying to, you know, damage with this financial transaction tax. Why would they do that? You know, when they want growth and they want to, you know, the Americans are not putting a tax on their transactions. Neither is Hong Kong, neither is Australia or China. It just shows the mental attitude they have and lack of understanding to our economy. We are nowhere similar in our outlook to the rest of Europe. You see that by the laws. We have a different legal system. It's about time that we just had the national debate, and I believe that national debate would lead to our withdrawal.
One final question, Nikki, and it comes from Carl, who says, is it because of the EU we never win the Eurovision Song Contest?
I'm actually quite a big fan of the Eurovision Contest. and I actually think the voting kind of says it all. And probably, on a serious point, I think the voting probably explains why, you know, we're not all the same. And we're culturally different, and we have our own prejudices. And that those that think they can mould us into one country are just so fundamentally wrong, and it's going to cause more and more problems.
Nikki Sinclaire, thank you very much
Pleasure.
indeed.